All right, so welcome to Winning Resumes or How to Build a Winning Resume. And my name is Christy Vanderhoof, and I am the Career Center Coordinator here at Las Positas College. So, what that means is that I coordinate the job fairs and events related to employment that we have on campus. And then I also teach workshops on topics like these and help students one on one with resumes, interviewing, job search, career exploration, and many other things. So this is my email address if you need to reach me. I will also put it in chat. I will be emailing you all of the materials and samples that I show you today, but if you don't receive my email for some reason, you could also reach out to me and email me. And a lot of the resources that I'm showing you today can be found on the Career Center website, so I'll also show you where to find those. So, first of all, this is an interactive workshop, so feel free to ask questions through chat or feel free to unmute if you are comfortable with that. And then if there's time, at the end of the workshop, we'll play a Kahoot game to see what you learned. And so as I mentioned, I'm the Career Center Coordinator at LPC, and I also teach a class called Work Experience, which is for students that are participating in, they want to get credit for internships or jobs that they're participating in. I've also volunteered at Jails to Jobs and advised students at a university at Fresno State. And I've also taught English and ESL here at Las Positas. So I'd like to learn a little bit about you. In particular, I'm wondering if you already have a resume or if you are going to be starting from scratch. And then what kind of work or job you're seeking. And then how many years of experience you have, a work experience. So, and if you're a veteran, you can let me know if you're a veteran as well, because there's things that veterans in particular can put on your resumes, so we can talk about that too. So feel free to answer these questions in the chat, and then we'll continue. But yeah, I just want to learn a little bit more about you and what you're looking for from this workshop. All right, so keep going. So I didn't get anything in the chat. So if you, probably you were just taking time to write it. Okay, great. Thank you. So a poll, on average, how much time do you think a recruiter spends reading a resume? A, B, C, or D? Write your answer in the chat. Okay, great. And you're both computer science majors, so thank you for letting me know that. Okay, A and B. Okay, actually, the correct answer is D, 6 seconds. So what this means is this is when the recruiter initially looks at your resume. So they might spend a longer time reading it when they are interviewing you. But when they initially look at your resume to see if you would be a good fit for the role, they're really not reading it. They're more like scanning it. And this is helpful for us to know because we want to know what they're looking for, right? So these are the 10 things these are the things that they tend to look at. So one, they look at your name. They look at job titles you've held and companies you've worked for. They look to see how long you worked at each place to get a sense of your level of experience. They definitely look at your education, what you've studied. And then they are also looking for particular skills and keywords from the job description to see how well qualified you are for the position. So with that in mind, we want these things to be easy for them to find. So we might put them in bold, and then we might use a format that makes it easier for them to find certain keywords. So these are the different sections of the resume that we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to walk you through these sections right now by looking at a resume sample. So here's a sample student resume that a student could use for applying for a job or internship related to their major. So first there's the contact info section, then there's an objective, or many times there's a summary. So let me show you my sample that has a summary. See if I can find that right here. Okay, there's a summary like this. And actually most employers prefer a summary, although there are some exceptions. Then there's a skills section where you're thinking about those keywords that the employer is looking for, making it really easy to find them. Then there's education, again, making that easy to find. And then projects. And since you are both computer science students, I will say that having a project section is really important for computer science so that you can show them software that you used in order to code something, right? Like if you built an app or you built a game or something like that, you would give the project a name and tell us which class you completed it in and show how you practically used what you learned in your class. And then, of course, there's experience. So this can be work experience, sometimes leadership experience. And then there's extracurricular activities. So these are additional things that are not work, like maybe being part of a club or being involved in a sport or volunteer work. And then there are awards. So these last few sections are optional, but every resume includes experience, education, skills, and a summary. So I'm going to talk individually about each of these. So the contact info section, it might not seem like that big of a deal, but it's actually your first impression on the employer. And so your name, keeping in mind that your name is the title of your resume, it's going to be the largest thing in the resume. And so you want it slightly larger than everything else. It doesn't need to be huge, you know, it doesn't need to be like 72-point font or anything like that, but it should stand out. Phone number, make sure it's a working phone number with a voicemail that you check regularly and where you have a professional voicemail message. So if you have a personalized message, make sure it says something like, "Hi, I can't get to the phone right now, but please leave me your name, number, and a brief message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." So just something like that. It's optional for you to include your location. When you do, only include the city, state, and zip code. Don't include the street address. And also watch out for your email. That's part of your impression. So even if you have a fun email like glitterlady22@gmail.com, that's not going to be the email on your resume. You want something that has your name. Numbers are okay, though I don't recommend including date of birth or graduation date in the numbers because that reveals private information about you, can also lead to age discrimination. So, so yeah, but just something simple with your name, some random numbers. Email carriers I recommend would be Gmail, Yahoo, something that's pretty common, iCloud. I wouldn't recommend old email carriers like AOL or sbcglobal.net because sometimes people might make assumptions that you're not very tech savvy if you have a really old email carrier like that. And then it's optional for you to include a LinkedIn URL. You certainly don't need to include it, but if you have a LinkedIn profile that you're proud of and that you want them to see, you can add that to your resume. And below is a sample contact info section for Luke Skywalker if he had his own resume. Any questions about contact information? Okay, the next thing is what's called your headline. So this can go in a few different spots. In this resume, the headline is actually kind of incorporated into the contact information section. In this resume, the headline is integrated into the summary section. And then in this resume here, the headline is not really there at all. They don't really have a headline, but I recommend this version. This is my favorite to include it in the person's name in the contact info section like this. And the headline is basically what kind of work you're targeting or what you do. So you change it depending on what you're applying for. And if you're if you're going to a job fair or a place where you might learn about several different kinds of opportunities that you could apply for, you could put a few different related roles. Like if you were Luke Skywalker, you'd put Jedi Master, Spiritual Director, and Levitation Instructor, maybe. So this is your headline. Lets the recruiter know exactly what you are applying for, what you're looking for. Next is your summary. So that's the first section below your contact info. That's where you write like a mini resume. And it helps someone see important information about you right away. It's going to be about 3 to 4 lines. And you don't want it to be a super long paragraph. You want it to include keywords from the job posting. And you want to include any special accomplishments, strengths, or skills that you really want them to see at the beginning. And often the summary will have something about experience in a certain area. So like this one says, I'm a bilingual accounting student with experience in tax preparation. And sometimes like in this sample, for example, you can put the number of years of experience. If it's more than like a couple years, or if you see on the job description that they're looking for a certain number of years, this is a good thing to include in the resume as well. And so that's the summary. So you'll see these different components of the summary, right? So the years of experience in a certain industry, certain skills that a person has, certain personal qualities that somebody has. And so yeah, as you can see, it's a summary, right? So it's short and sweet. And so the summary can be a little bit tricky to write sometimes. So I always tell people to actually complete all the other sections of the resume and then come back to the top and write the summary later. Because then you'll know, once you have all the other sections, you'll know what you're summarizing. And I have a template for you to use. If you've ever played Mad Libs, it's kind of like Mad Libs where you just fill in the blank. So you can see this sample that I have up here came from this template. So we have a adjective noun, a bilingual accounting student with experience in tax preparation. So this can help you fill in your summary. Okay, so that's the summary. Anyone have questions about anything I've talked about so far? Contact info, headline, summary. Okay, got a question? No, no questions. Okay. So we'll keep going. Okay, so next we have skills. So this is where you want to think about incorporating keywords from the job posting. And generally I recommend about 9 to 12 skills so that you don't overwhelm the employer, but you give them what the most relevant skills that they're looking for. And you'll want short phrases like 2 to 3 words so that it's easy to read and easy to identify within those 6 seconds when they're looking at the resume. And you can try to make the skill section like the visual center of the resume. So if we look at this sample here, you can see how the skill section, like you look at the name and then your eyes just automatically gravitate towards the skill section. And what you want to emphasize in your resume are mostly hard skills. So hard skills are like technical skills or skills that can be measured or that can be taught. So like your typing speed or software programs you know how to use, or your language ability, or a lot of your industry related skills are hard skills. So like down here in this highlighted skills section, SolidWorks would be a hard skill. Can you tell me another hard skill that you see in that white box there? What's another example? AutoCAD, awesome. Okay, and then soft skills, these are the ones that are more difficult for someone to measure, but there's a saying that your hard skills help you get the job and your soft skills help you keep the job. Because even if someone has all of the technical skills that they need, if they don't have good interpersonal skills or a good work ethic, if they don't show up to work, they're not going to be able to be successful in the job, right? So sometimes employers do ask for particular soft skills on a job description. And so if they ask for those, it is good to try to include them in the resume. So what are some soft skills that you see in the white box here? Great, troubleshooting, interpersonal communication. Okay. Bilingual, I could see how you might see that as a soft skill, but it's actually technically a hard skill because it can be measured. Someone could give you a test to see how well you speak a language. But if you're a good problem solver, if you're good at communicating with people, you're going to be successful in many different kinds of jobs. So those are the soft skills, hard skills. But in a resume, a lot of times recruiters are looking more for hard skills because they will usually evaluate your soft skills in an interview. So in an interview, then they'll see if you show up to the interview on time. They'll see how well you communicate. They'll ask you about a time that you helped a difficult customer. So if you don't have enough space to put everything in the skill section, you can emphasize the hard skills more than the soft skills. And if you're like, I don't think I have any skills, I do have students tell me something like that. I'm like, no, everybody has skills. Then ask yourself, if you can speak a second or third language, or are you proficient in Microsoft Office or Google Suite? Do you work well in teams? Can you read a blueprint or follow instructions? Are you good at solving problems? Can you make mathematical calculations? Are you good at public speaking? Do you know how to use Canva? Can you use social media? So these are all different types of skills you could put on a resume. And then if you're not sure which skills to put, you can analyze the job description. So I have a sample job description down here, and I've highlighted certain things that they're looking for. So electronic troubleshooting, engineering hardware testing, complex electronic assembly, soldering, wiring, troubleshooting. There is again. So if you see a skill twice, you definitely want to make sure that you put it in your resume. And then now you can see the skills section, right? You can see how those skills went from the job description into the skills section. And then for some things, you can even incorporate it into the summary, especially if it's a longer phrase, or you want to tell them how much experience you have with something. And this is an important thing. So what you want to avoid doing is something that people sometimes call spray and pray. Spray and pray is where you send out the same exact resume to a ton of employers, and then you pray that somebody calls you for an interview. This is not as effective as tailoring your resume slightly to the type of job you're applying for. Looking at the job description, analyzing what they're looking for, and then tailoring your resume, just the skills and summary section a little bit to show them that you read the job description, and to show them how you meet the qualifications they're looking for. And this will increase your chances of getting an interview. And of course, if you pray, you could still pray that you get an interview, right? But this will also help a lot. So, and when you're tailoring your resume, keep in mind that you don't have to make the resume longer. You're just thinking about making the resume more relevant to what they're looking for. So that's about the skills section. Any questions about skills or resume tailoring before we move on? All right. Next, we have the education section. So for current students, it's often a good idea to put your education section next, because sometimes you might have jobs like this one that are not very related to what you actually want to do. And so therefore, it's better to show the recruiter first that your education is really related to what you're studying. There's a typo right there. So you can put in the degree that you're pursuing here at Las Positas, the expected graduation date, and then of course the school and name. It's optional to also include relevant coursework that you've taken. So these would be major courses for your major. However, keep in mind that you don't necessarily have to have these things. Sometimes recruiters just want to see what you learned in your courses mapped out in your skills section, and it's optional to have the relevant coursework. So just know that. In this section, you could also include other certifications you have, like if you have a CPR certification or first aid certification, or maybe you did an industry related certification. And if you recently graduated from high school, like within the last year, you could still include your high school diploma and any like awards or activities from high school. But once it's been more than a year or two, then you should remove those things and focus more on recent experience and education. Because people can assume that you have a high school degree if you're going to college. And you also can include your GPA if it's 3.0 or higher. If it's less than 3.0, just don't put it on the resume. And if it's been more than 5 years since you graduated from college, you can remove the date. And someone asked a question, does it help much if I show my graduation date? The resumes I have showing my education only had relevant classes and degree. That's a great question. The important thing about showing your expected graduation date is that way they'll know if you're eligible for, like if you're applying for an internship, they want to know if you're eligible. So sometimes for an internship, they might say, we're looking for someone who is in their second year of school, right? Well, then if you say you're expecting to graduate in May 2024, then they'll probably assume that you are in your second or third year at Las Positas, that you're a sophomore. And then they'll know that you're eligible for the internship. So that's the benefit of giving them the expected graduation date. So most of recruiters do ask for that. That's a great question. Okay. So next thing is if you're if you haven't graduated yet, you write just expected before the graduation date. And then if you went to another college before Las Positas, but you didn't get a degree there, you could still include it. Some college is always better than no college. And if you want, you could add the number of credits that you completed, but you don't have to. Okay. And I think I wrote on here, you don't have to include the high school diploma, but like I said, if it's been just a year, you could still include it. Okay, next section is the project section. So this is an optional section, but I definitely would recommend it for computer science students so that you can talk about different coding projects you did. Because especially if you haven't had a chance to apply your skills in a job, then having these projects shows how you applied the skills to get some practical experience. And these could be projects that you did as part of a class, or they could be projects that you did on your own just for fun, or maybe with a club, like if you're in the computer science club and you worked on a project in that club, you could include it as well. And so you can format it like this. You can give your project a title. Many times people also put a name of the class that they were in when they did the project. So like, for example, Computing Fundamentals 1, Las Positas College, and then you can have the date, right? So this is how you do the project section. If I needed to, I could put this down here. And then you just have a few bullet points highlighting certain skills that you used to complete the project, any results that you delivered through the project. So this is really helpful for them to see. And I will say for computer science students, sometimes they have two sections. So sometimes they have a general skills section like this, and then they have a technical skills section where they list all of their coding skills and other computer related skills. Just depends on how many they have. I mean, you might be able to fit them all in here, but if you have a lot, you could have a separate technical skills section. And then I do also sometimes see that computer science students might have a GitHub link here, or another link where someone could see their work. And likewise, like if you're a graphic design student, you can put your portfolio in a website and then put a link to your portfolio here. So those are different ways to showcase your work. The next section is the experience section. So this is where you put in paid work experience. Sometimes people will also include relevant volunteer work if they want it to pop up earlier in the resume. And if you've been working for a long time, you can include up to 15 years of experience. You'll want to list your jobs in reverse chronological order. So that means that the most recent job is here at the top, and then the older jobs are down towards the bottom. In general, it's a good idea to try to fill employment gaps that are more than 6 months long. So here's an example of somebody who has an employment gap. Their last job for an employer was in 2014. And since then, they've been a stay-at-home parent and they've been volunteering at their child's school. But notice how there's still things in the experience section here, right? It's not just blank. Because even if you weren't getting paid, employers want to see what you were doing with your time. So these are some ways people deal with employment gaps. And in my one-on-one appointments, I help people with additional ways to fill employment gaps on their resume. And you might not think of something as employment, but it is. So like if you helped someone with their business, or like if you worked in the family business, you can put your role in the business and then the name of the business and treat it like it's a job. Even like babysitting for your family or things like that. So, and I've also seen students put leadership roles. So like if they were the president of a club, I've seen them put that in the experience section. And I think that's an okay thing to do as well if you especially want to highlight that you had a leadership role in something. And then the other thing you want to do in the experience section is you want to include things called, oh, and I forgot to mention this. I don't think anyone said they're a veteran, but if anyone watching this in the future is a veteran, it's really good for you to put your experience working on base on your resume. And if you're not sure how to translate your job title into civilian terms, these are a couple of helpful websites that you could use in order to do that. And so for each job or position, you include different things. So one, you include the job title. Oh, actually, this is a little bit backwards. Hold on. Here we go. The job title. I usually bold the job title because that's usually something that the employers are looking for. And then, so you don't necessarily need to bold the company. And then the other thing you include is the organization or the employer, the location. So if it was out of the country, you can do the city and country, or if it's in the US, you do the city and the state. And then you include the dates of employment. Most employers look for months and years. And then you have these bullet points, and these are what we call accomplishment statements. So in other words, you're not just seeing what you were assigned to do, but you're showing how well you did it. So you're not just saying that you created invoices and maintained financial records, but you're saying that you created invoices and maintained meticulous financial records using Microsoft Excel. So also letting them know which skills you used to do the work. And then talking about the results of what you did. Caught an error that saved the company 15% in operational costs. So whenever you can incorporate percentages and numbers into your accomplishment statements, these really stand out. Our eyes naturally gravitate a lot towards numbers. So this is again good to include. So it can be results of what you did. It can be the volume of work that you did or people that you served. And then, like I said, including skills that you used. And one way to think of these is thinking of the acronym challenge, action, result. Okay, so the challenge maybe was, or problem, action, result, right? The problem was maybe the financial records were kind of a mess, or there was a lot, you had to audit them. The action you took was that you maintained the financial records, and then the positive result was that you saved the company 15% in operational costs. So thinking about when you write these, you can think about challenges or problems that you overcame in your job and write about that. And notice that all the bullet points start with an action verb. So we've got coordinate, plan, establish, maintain, plan, use, supervise. And whenever possible, you try to vary these. So there are action verb lists that can be really helpful. I will send you a few. And actually, I'll send you both of these. So let's see, I need to get back to Zoom. All right. So here's an example of the accomplishment statements. So thinking of problems you solved at work. And so not just giving a very general thing, but giving a more detailed accomplishment statement. So I'll send you this. And then if you're trying to think of good action words to start your bullet points with, this list is from the Tri-Valley Career Center. So they have some really helpful tools for editing your resume. And then, yeah, and I will say it can be harder to incorporate numbers. So if that feels daunting, just focus on getting down the main things that you did and then go back and think about ways to make your bullet points more exciting. So you want to avoid these weak bullets and you want to try to get these better or best bullets. So shoot for at least getting the better bullets. Efficiently checked patients in and process co-payments. But whenever you can, try to get a best bullet that has a number in there as well. All right, that's what I've got for the work experience section. One last thing is if you're trying to think of what you can do for the accomplishment statements, you could ask yourself questions like these. So how much did you do? How quickly did you finish your work? Using percentages and mentioning specific skills. So you'll notice that a skill might show up a couple times in a resume. It might show up in the job description or in the accomplishment statements. And then it also shows up in the skill section so that it's easy for the employer to find it. And I have sometimes seen on resumes that people will actually bold skills within here because they want people to find it more easily. But you just want to do, if you do that, just do it sparingly. Don't bold too much because too much bold makes it hard for people to know what to focus on. And then they just get overwhelmed and they don't look at anything. So use it sparingly. Okay, next is the extracurricular activity section. So like I said, this is optional, but it is really good to have, especially if you don't have a lot of work experience yet. You can definitely add a lot to this section. And if you're ever writing a resume for a scholarship, definitely add as much as you can in this area. To include sports, clubs, volunteer work, leadership roles you held. You can add bullet points to them just like you do for the work experience section. And then if your volunteer work was political or faith-based, focus on whatever you did that's most relevant to the job or internship you're applying to. So like, let's say you taught religious lessons like at a church or mosque or temple. You could still include that, especially if you're applying to work with kids somewhere, right? It's still relevant to the job. So you might still want to include it. But then sometimes people don't want to include it because they're like, I don't want people to know what my religion is because I don't want to be discriminated based on my religion. So it's really a personal choice that you make. But you mostly just think about how relevant it is to the work that you're doing. And then you can also think of ways to just focus more on the skills, right? That like you taught lessons to kids and you manage their behavior and things like that. And maybe you don't go into as much detail about the religious aspect of it. So that's another thing that I help people with one-on-one because it's kind of on a case-by-case basis as well. Okay, awards and honors. This is again an optional section, but also a great section to have if you don't have a lot of work experience yet. Whatever awards you include, it's good to think about if they're relevant to the job. So maybe you won like a poetry contest 10 years ago, but now you're applying to be a pro computer programmer. You probably don't need to put the poetry contest on your awards section, right? So you just think about what showcases your leadership skills, your work ethic, and your abilities in your field. And if you are awarded a scholarship, which involved merit, right? It wasn't just based on financial need, but also like you had to write an essay and be specifically chosen for that scholarship, then you can include that on your resume as well. So you can see in this sample, there's a merit scholarship and then there's the amount of money that was awarded. So that's the awards and honors section. So these are all the sections of the resume that we just went through. I will say the extracurricular activities section, sometimes it's called community involvement, sometimes it's called leadership. So sometimes people give that a different name. But you generally want to use these same section titles for your resume because recruiters will be looking for them. And another thing I wanted to mention is that it's important to showcase what you've done. Sometimes students think they need to be an expert in a skill before they put it on their resume, and that's not true. Even if you just have like a basic working knowledge of something, you can include it as a skill on your resume. But also don't put things that you don't have, right? So you don't want to lie on your resume because then you might get a job or internship that you're actually not qualified for. And that wastes your time and it wastes the employer's time and money as well. So only put things on your resume that you have actually done. And things that you don't want to put on your resume, you don't want to put a photograph or your date of birth. You don't want to include your street address. Objective statements are going out of style. I will say that there are a few employers that like them. I know that the Lawrence Livermore National Lab likes objective statements, for example, but then I know that Workday and more like private sector, they like the headline and the summary. So most people prefer a headline and a summary. You don't need to write references available upon request. And you don't want to include fancy fonts or borders. So yeah, and sorry, this image is a little bit blurry. I got it from some Google Images, thought it detailed a lot of these things well, but yeah, so just make sure to avoid these things. Other general resume tips. You'll want to keep your resume to 1 page if you're new to the field. So if you're just starting out, you don't need a 2-page resume, especially when applying for jobs or internships. But if you have more work experience, you could have 10 to 15 years of experience. Or if you're writing a resume for a scholarship or college application, it could be 2 pages or longer. But the general recommendation is 1 page. Don't listen to your English professor about numerals. I can say that because I used to teach English. So write the numerals rather than the words because the numerals show up better on the resume. We pay attention to them more. Keep your margins 1 inch or 0.75 inches wide. Whatever formatting you use, just keep it consistent. Use a sans serif font. So these are examples of sans serif fonts. They're the kinds of fonts we see on websites a lot. They're a lot easier to read and scan than serif fonts like Times New Roman. Serif fonts just cause us to slow down a bit more. Your font size should never be smaller than 11 point. So don't be like, oh, I can't fit my resume on 1 page. I'm just going to put it in 9 point. No, you don't want to do that. Then people won't be able to read it. So make sure you keep it around 11 point or higher. And then another thing to know is that 2-column resumes are sometimes hard to read. And I'll give you an example of what I mean in just a minute. Another thing to keep in mind is that your resume is a living document. So you want to keep adding new accomplishments, skills, and experiences to it. Don't wait until you're looking for a job to add to your resume. It's easier to remember what you accomplished in the moment rather than trying to remember things a couple years later. Tailor your resume when you apply for a specific job. Use those keywords from the job description. Remember that your resume is your first impression, so you need to have good attention to detail. You don't want to have typos, grammar, spelling mistakes, slang. So read it out loud to yourself, read it backwards, and even better, have someone else review it before you submit it. Oftentimes it's good to email your resume as a PDF, but JobScan recommends uploading a resume as a Word document when, unless it's specified, because they say that computer systems can scan Word documents better than PDFs. And then finally, since you'll be tailoring your resume, you want to use a consistent file name to save your resumes so you can easily go back and find them when you get called for an interview or if you're applying for a similar job or internship in the future. So your next steps, there are some resume tools you can check out. So all of the things that I went over today are on the resume resources page on the Career Center website. So I'm going to stop my share for just a minute and show you some of those online resources. So so if you go straight to the Career Center page, which is just laspositascollege.edu/career center, click on Student Resources. You'll see resume resources. And everything that I just showed you today is here. So this presentation, template. So the template is basically the same as these samples, but without the people's personal information. So you can download that if you want to create something kind of like the samples we looked at today. Or if you use Google Docs, this is a resume template on Google that I recommend. And then you can just add any of those additional sections we talked about. But I really like the use of color in this. And it's also like a 1-column resume. When you go to Google, let me just stop my share for a minute so that I can start some new documents. So when you go to Google, they have some different resume templates, but they're not all that great. Like, for example, I do not recommend this template here because it wastes a lot of white space here on the left. And it's also in 2 columns. And if you upload your resume to an online application system, the online application system might only read this column and it won't read the second column. And so then it won't see all of your qualifications. And then the online application system will say that you're not qualified for the job. And then a recruiter will never look at it. So this kind of format's not good. You want something like this where everything is all just one thing after another. So you can see that template. You can see a lot of the samples I shared with you today. Once you finish your resume, you will definitely want to sign into Handshake, which is our job board. Here's Handshake. This is what it looks like on the homepage. You can go to your profile and click on your photo or your initials and edit your profile. And you can add a resume here. Handshake will also actually pull data from your resume to help you fill in your profile. And then this is nice. Then employers on Handshake can see you and they can message you directly if they have an opportunity that fits your qualifications. So, and also I'll let you know there's more samples, resumes from UC Davis, UC Berkeley, and then I have some information on cover letters. And this is again all on the resume resources page. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to share with you today. So I'm going to stop the recording. And then